Canadian elites want to rewrite our history and erase any mention of the old history. Now, this, in theory, is a bid to make newcomers and new immigrants feel more welcome and more comfortable. But does it actually do that? Well, today I'm joined by writer and scholar Samuel Sey to discuss how people really feel about woke cancel culture bids. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show. Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel. If you're listening to this podcast and you enjoy it, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. Don't forget to check out our website, tnc.news. Okay, so you've definitely heard the news by now. On Thursday, December 14th, Toronto voted, the Socialist mayor and the city council voted unanimously to rename the city's iconic Dundas Square. The new name would become Sankofa Square. Well, Andrew Lawton almost immediately broke the story that the name Sankofa comes from a tribe in Africa, in Ghana, called the Akan tribe, and they actually have their own sordid history when it comes to slavery. They were part of the slave trade, part of the transatlantic slave trade. They used their own slaves. So we were told that Henry Dundas had to go because of his alleged connections to slavery. Turns out that Henry Dundas was actually quite an abolitionist who fought against slavery and helped end slavery in the British Empire. And yet here we are bringing in a new name that has its own connections. It really makes you shake your head and wonder what's going on in City Council in Toronto. Do they do research? Do they even bother Googling things before they try to fundamentally change Canada? Well, I wanted to bring in a new perspective, a different perspective on this story. So I've asked writer, scholar, and occasional True North contributor Samuel Sey on the program today to get his perspective. So Samuel, welcome to the Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Sam, so you saw the story, and well, first of all, I just want to say congratulations on the recent birth of your son. Welcome to the joys of fatherhood and parenthood. It's really wonderful to see you and your wife so happy. And I did want to get your perspective on what is happening in Toronto. So what do you think of all this?
Yeah, I'm a Ghanaian Canadian. I'm actually part of the Akan tribe. So this when I read this, I'm like, it's frankly so stupid to me. It's absurd. You mentioned already just how dumb it is because of the fact that if the whole goal is to try to erase the so-called connections to slavery, well, I mean the Akan tribe, particularly the Ashanti tribe, the biggest tribe within the Akan tribe, were massive slave traders. They didn't just trade with the Europeans. They were the one who actually suggested the slave trade to the Europeans, right? And then it was actually, of course, the Europeans, especially the British, that abolished the slave trade. People like Henry Dundas. Now they say that he helped delay the slave trade as well too. Well, in a sense, that's true, but they're ignoring a lot of context there. Nevertheless, he was still an abolitionist. At least, even if he's an imperfect abolitionist, he's still an abolitionist. But the Akan tribe, or particularly the Ashanti tribe within the Akan tribe in Ghana, they were not abolitionists. They were forced to end slavery through the British. So it's so bizarre that they would choose this name to. And one of the fascinating things is that as an Akan person, as a Ghanaian, the meaning of Sankofa is actually very, very important. It means that we should not erase the past. It means that we should not forget the past. We should remember it, right? And to try to live in a better way because we remember the past. Well, this is so bizarre because this is literally trying to ignore the past. Right, so it's really weird that they're choosing the name Sankofa by doing the very thing that the meaning of the word suggests you shouldn't do. So it's so bizarre.
Wow, Sam. Well, thanks for sharing. I mean, there's so much irony wrapped up in this, right? It's like you're taking away the name of an abolitionist and naming it after a tribe that turns out is sort of infamous or well known, at least for people who are aware of it, with their ties to slavery. And then, of course, the meaning of that word is to do exactly the opposite of what City Council has done. Interesting. I noticed on Twitter there's a woman named Jennifer Dundas who she's actually a guest on Harrison Faulkner's Ratioed podcast the other day. I definitely recommend you check that out. But she's a descendant of Henry Dundas. She's actually a former CBC journalist as well and a Crown prosecutor. She wrote that the name was on a short list for 14 months and that there was a lot of debate inside council about this. So you would think, they've been planning to do this for years. This was on the short list for 14 months. Why didn't anybody bother to sort of look into this? Did they not think about it? Like, what do you think the mindset is behind this unanimous vote? Like every single counselor, there wasn't a single one that said, hey guys, hold on a second, let's like maybe think this through a little more. No one, apparently no one in city council had that insight. Why do you think that is, Sam?
Well, we've seen lately in our country, considering what happened with the Nazi that was celebrated by our parliament, that when they're thinking of virtue signaling, they're not really thinking about doing research. They're so focused on getting applause from certain groups of people that they just choose to not care about the history. They don't care to think about whether it was a Nazi, looking him up to make sure that he's actually a Nazi and not really this war hero that they're making him out to be, or like the word Sankofa. They're not thinking about, what are the ties here? Could anything go wrong with this? They seem to be so focused with virtue signaling that that's all that matters to them. And look, here's the reality. I'm a young Ghanaian Canadian. Ghanaian Canadians do not care about this. We're not like there's no Ghanaian Canadian that I know, and I spoke to many of them who are like, yeah, this is no what they care about, right? And look, black Canadians tend to be, of course, almost all immigrants, right? First generation immigrants or second generation immigrants, and what they care about most is the economy. They care about fixing the issues that young people, right, young families are that Ghanaian Canadians are trying to feed their families right now. They're trying to buy homes. They can't. Nobody cares about changing this. It's not pleasing anybody. But as always, it is just the silly government trying to ignore real issues facing real immigrants. They're trying to ignore that by doing this virtue signaling, and it's not doing anything. Nobody cares.
I really do think that a lot of Canadians have just had enough in general, and it's interesting to hear your perspective about immigrant Canadians and Black Canadians as well. It seems to me, really, Sam, that multiculturalism is failing before our eyes. I'll give you a few examples of just what we've seen in the past, 72 hours here in Toronto. It seems that all the bad stuff is happening in Toronto. So first up at Yorkdale Mall, just north of Toronto in the northern part of the city, we saw families being harassed and intimidated by Hamas supporters at Yorkdale Mall. They're visiting Santa Claus, okay? They're with their kids trying to sit on Santa's knee, and you can hear the jeers and the shouting of the crowd. Let's play that quick clip.
Jesus was Palestinian!
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 Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Next, down at Eaton Centre, which is just across the street from Dundas Square, we saw more Hamas supporters, this time swearing at Christmas shoppers and even threatening police officers. Looks like a pretty scary, intimidating crowd. Here's a quick glimpse of what that looked like.
I'm telling you, because if you touch his leg, put him on the floor. You come near now, put your leg down on the floor. I'll lay you sleep. I'll put you 6 feet deep. I'll put you 6 feet deep.
And then finally, Sam, we saw the news of this gigantic 55-foot religious statue being erected in Brampton, Ontario. There was a tremendous backlash and opposition to this large statue, of course, against the backdrop that Canadian statues get torn down with some frequency. And as we're talking about today, names get removed from our history. And so it's a little strange to see other cultures getting celebrated in this way. What is happening in Toronto? What's happening in Canada? And what can we do about all this?
Honestly, it is a symptom of what's happened to our country with multiculturalism. Look, I'm an immigrant. I love my Ghanaian culture, but I also know that I'm in Canada, and that Canada, we do have a culture. It's unfortunate that we're trying to push this multiculturalism thing. There is a Canadian history and a Canadian culture, and people are trying to abandon that. These are, of course, the woke leftists. But the reason why I mention that is because, look, when I immigrated to the country 26 years ago, I knew that I had to assimilate. I knew that there was a dominant culture that I had to respect, and I love the culture that I've came to respect. But the issue now is this: when you push multiculturalism, what you're doing is you're teaching people, you're teaching new immigrants, new citizens, not to respect the culture that Canada has. Therefore, and look, when you have multiculturalism, you're going to have competing cultures. So what happens is when people have competing cultures, there will eventually be a struggle for a dominant culture. And you're seeing that right now. There's some people who want their culture to dominate other Canadians. And that's what you're seeing already with some of these, what happened at Yorkdale Mall, or what we've seen already with a lot of the protests, the anti-Semitic protests we've been seeing as well too. There are people who are trying to establish their own dominant culture because they know that unfortunately so many Canadians or so many politicians want to do away with the Canadian culture. Now, when it comes to that statue, it's work. I'm from Brampton, and I know that's in Brampton. That to me is absurd as well too, because the reality is this: is that I, believe in religious freedom, right? I want anybody who, I don't want Hindus to be, of course, kept from coming to the country necessarily. That's not the case at all. However, the reality is now, if you are somebody in Brampton, you have this massive statue that you almost can't avoid. It's like, 55 foot tall. There is this. It's basically Brampton saying the God we worship here is a Hindu God. I can't imagine that if some other religious group wanted to establish that would be okay. I can't imagine that would be tolerated. But because it seems like we are okay respecting any other religion except for the traditional Christian religion in Canada, then that's okay. And again, this stuff is going to keep happening if Canada continues to reject its own cultural heritage.
No, that's a really good point. Like, I completely agree with the religious freedom aspect of it. I think that Hindus should be able to pray however they want. I'm glad that they have that freedom in Canada. I'm very happy that they come in so many ways. Hindus are model citizens. But there is something political, like a statement being made by erecting a statue of that size happening. It's like a misreading of the tone of the country. Like, everyone else's statues are getting torn, and you're erecting this large statue. You can draw some like historical parallels to that. But if anything, it's just a little bit like distasteful or disrespectful in Canada. But I think you're right. I think that newcomers have sort of lost the respect, and Canadians, it's our fault. We haven't, especially our elites and those in charge, haven't demanded that newcomers respect Canada and come to terms with the fact that there is a dominant culture. I thought it was interesting, Samuel, you might not have heard this, but there was a proposal to make December Christian Heritage Month in Canada so that Canadians can learn about Christianity and the traditions that actually helped found this country. Like, a country was based on Christian morals and values, and it was rejected. and if you look at the list of all of the other heritage months that we celebrate in Canada, November is actually Hindu Heritage Month, and like every other culture and every other country and every other religion gets a month or at least a week or a day to celebrate their heritage. And when it comes to the founding religion of this country, no, you can't have that.
Yeah, and our the official motto of Canada is explicitly Christian, right? It has come from Psalm 72, right? From dominion to dominion. That's referring to Christ's lordship and kingship over Canada. And yet here we are rejecting this, and we rather have. And speaking of doing away with Henry Dundas because he supposedly wasn't a real abolitionist. Well, here's the issue. I mean, let's face it. There have been a lot of atrocities that has happened under a lot of Hindu pagan worship. And here we are, though, choosing a pagan god to be erected in Brampton, while, as you said, in terms of, while we're, doing away with some historical figures that mean a lot to Canada, we're saying that, well, they should be canceled, but we should celebrate Hindu gods that, again, in the name of worshiping them, so many atrocities have happened under these gods as well. It's absolutely absurd. But again, while we continue to reject the Christian traditional history that has made Canada what it is, we are going to have a very different Canada, and we're seeing that now.
It's so true how they sort of whitewash the crimes and the real dark parts of history from other cultures, and only focus on the dark moments in Canadian history, which really aren't that dark compared to some of the histories of the rest of the world. Well, Samuel, I always really appreciate talking to you. I love your perspective. I love hearing from you. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful Christmas with your new and growing family. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for tuning in. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show.